When we think about fossils, it's easy to imagine that every paleontological discovery follows a pattern. A bone here, a shell there, everything fitting perfectly into the categories we already know. But the truth is that the fossil record holds secrets so bizarre that they leave even specialists completely lost. And today, here at Aquaria Extenta, we're going to dive into the most enigmatic marine creatures that science has ever found. Critters so strange that nobody really knows what the hell they were. Let's start at the bottom of the pit of scientific confusion. The Francevilian biota, discovered in Gabon, Africa. Brace yourself, because we're talking about structures that date back an incredible 2.1 billion years. From the Riachian period, a name that, by the way, comes from lava current, which already gives you an idea of the chaos that Earth was at that time. Researchers found black shale deposits filled with strange forms, discs, tubes, structures that look like strung pearls, and even something resembling flowers. The problem? Nobody is absolutely certain whether this is a fossil or just a geological prank from nature. The controversy started because these structures are more than 400 million years older than any known evidence of multicellular life. Some scientists argue that they are colonial eukaryotic organisms, while others claim they might just be inorganic pyrite formations or diagenesis artifacts. Studying something 2 billion years old is absurdly difficult, especially when you're trying to decide whether that thing was alive or not. But recent isotopic analyses found zinc enrichment in these structures, a possible indicator of eukaryotic metabolism. If these things really were alive, they were probably planktonic organisms that floated in water columns of shallow, warm deltas, rare environments on an Earth that barely had dry land. Now, jumping a few million years forward, we arrive at the Ediacaran, a period between 635 and 538.8 million years ago that was a true festival of aberrations. That's when macroscopic life began to leave abundant fossils. But what life? One of the most disturbing genera from that time is Namacalethus, which I can only describe as a combination of the most frightening traits you could imagine in a living being. When paleontologists found the first fossils, they thought they had discovered something where aliens would live. A structure with openings at the top that vaguely resembled a tree. But material analysis revealed that the trunks were calcified. It was an animal, and moreover, the oldest skeleton ever recorded, and it gets worse. Later discoveries showed that this creature was covered with infinite tentacles and rows of spines, capable of shredding anything they touched. Those openings, biological windows filled with organic matter of varied sizes and shapes, circles, hearts, hexagons, heptagons, you choose. And to make it worse, this monster could adjust its size depending on the habitat and appear practically anywhere, although it preferred the abyssal plains. What exactly was it? Nobody knows. It looks like coral, but it's too complex to be coral. The only certainty is that it was alive and terrifying. The Ediacaran also gifted us with other enigmas, like the enigmatic Dickinsonia, a flattened and segmented organism that moved across the seafloor as if it were an organic conveyor belt of oval shape. There were so many of these strange carpet-shaped animals that scientists created an entire phylum just for them. Despite the abundance of fossils, we don't know how they relate to other animals. Their morphology and lifestyle are endless debates. And there's an annoying detail. Although they seem perfectly symmetrical, they are slightly asymmetrical. One side doesn't mirror the other. Look closely and you'll see the misaligned lines. Unacceptable. Another theory suggests that these critters may not have left descendants, being evolutionary dead ends without exit. But let us leave the distant past and return to something only 330 million years ago. Typhlosis, discovered in the Bear Gulch Formation in Montana in the 70s. This find was so disconcerting that it remained underreported for decades. Nobody wanted to face the headache of trying to classify it. Nicknamed alien goldfish, Typhlosis had a tiny fusiform body, a single tail and, well, basically just that as external characteristics. No visible appendages, no midsection, no anus, and with an organ never seen before or after, the ferrodisc, which concentrated high amounts of iron and whose function remains an absolute mystery. Paleontologists initially tried to fit it into conodonts' jawless vertebrates, found practically everywhere. They even thought they had evidence when they discovered teeth similar to those of conodonts in a specimen. Temporary relief, until someone realized that the teeth didn't belong to Typhlosis, they were in its guts, indicating they were remains of something it ate. Back to square one, but now knowing it was carnivorous, this information went without update for 3 decades. Until, in 2022, a revolutionary theory emerged. Maybe, just maybe, Typhlosis was a mollusk. The basis, they discovered it had a toothed tongue that shot at prey directly from the intestine. Bizarre, right? But some current mollusks have similar structures called radula. Problem: radulas evolved independently in non-mollusks too. So we're still in the dark about what this blob really was. Meanwhile, in the Mazon Creek Formation in Illinois, the same place that gave us other aberrations, 2 fossils so confusing were discovered that they received alphabet letter names, Edichistus and Ishamasia, known as the H and Y animals respectively. Edichistus really looks like a giant H with a strange growth in the middle. We don't know why it had this shape or what the function of its limbs was, but researchers believe it fed on particles and floating organisms, probably being a colonial animal that grew its entire life, evidenced by specimens of very varied sizes. That protruding sac could have a circular shape, heart shape, or other forms, depending on the individual. If speculations are correct, it probably belonged to the phylum Hemicodata, which includes acorn worms and terebranches. As for Ishamasia Y-shaped, it seemed more well-behaved visually, but caused even more taxonomic problems. It has strong similarities with sea anemones, but presents characteristics that this group doesn't have. Bilateral symmetry, complete digestive tract, and, believe it, an anus. This destroyed any attempt at easy classification. We know it had a mouth in the form of a large slit between its so-called arms, but what these arms did is unknown. Actually, they might not even be arms. Back to Illinois, but now for the most famous monster on our list, Tullymonstrum, affectionately called the Tully Monster. In 1966, an amateur collector was exploring the Mazon Creek Formation from the Carboniferous. When he stumbled upon multiple strange fossils, he had no idea what they were. He took them to the Field Museum of Natural History, hoping for answers, but the experts were as perplexed as he was. Elongated, cylindrical shape, lateral triangular structures for propulsion. Eyeballs supported by stalks and a mouth extension similar to a proboscis. It looked like something straight out of an underwater nightmare. The only mercy was its small size. Most fossils were less than 35 centimeters. The strangeness of the Tully monster attracted international attention, but nobody could identify it. Theories included mollusk, arthropod, conodont, worm, tunicate, or some type of vertebrate. The only agreement was that it lived in water. After all, Illinois may be the prairie state today, but hundreds of millions of years ago it was submerged by a shallow tropical sea. From the location where they were found, it was presumed to be a marine organism, from open waters occasionally swept to the coast. Nearly 60 years after the discovery, we don't know much more. We've only concluded that it's a bilaterian, a classification so broad it covers 98% of all animals. We believe its strange mouth made it a carnivore that hunted in water columns and preferred murky waters. Beyond that, total mystery, and last but not least, enigmatic, we have Nectocorus. discovered in 1910 in the famous Burgess Shale. At the time, so many fossils were coming out of that location that it was basically forgotten. But it eventually returned to the spotlight when an English paleontologist described it as a completely new and mysterious creature, kind of like a stretched shrimp, hence its name, which means swimming shrimp. It had similarities with arthropods, but its fins were the opposite of expected. It remained unclassified. Years later, an Italian paleontologist examined photos and declared he had deciphered it. It would be a chordate, focusing on the caudal fin and what he called a notochord. This idea lasted 20 years until discoveries revealed that the original fossil was incomplete, very incomplete. In 2010, more than 91 specimens in much better conditions were unearthed, revealing that Nectocorus didn't look like a deformed shrimp, but rather a squid, flattened kite-shaped body, 2 tentacles, 2 eyes on stalks. No visible mouth except for a large funnel that may have been a reversible proboscis, meaning it could turn it inside out. Scary. With this cephalopod appearance, they proposed it was the first known cephalopod, 30 million years older than any other. But this went against everything we know about cephalopod evolution. It would be like finding a modern human before the most primitive primates had appeared. The idea was discarded. In 2019, a very similar fossil was found and named Nectocodis, creating together the controversial and currently homeless family Nectosauridae. So that's it, folks. The fossil record is much more confusing than it seems. Here at Aquaria Extinta, we love diving into these mysteries that paleontology hasn't yet managed to solve. If you enjoyed this journey through the most enigmatic creatures that ever swam in our ancestral oceans, leave that like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss the next episodes. Until the next underwater exploration.